pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, public forum. Seeing there's no public, we'll pass on that. Approval. Here comes some public. Public forum?
Yeah, we'll watch.
Okay. Everyone get a chance to review July 22nd minutes. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Chairman's report. The only I'm going to have is for this committee, apparently as of right now, unless it's changed, September 10th will be a joint meeting, Frank?
No, I don't know why the date's mixed up. It's October 8th.
Okay. October 8th then.
We had initially asked to meet in September, but their group isn't ready.
Okay. October 8th, the Collins Center will be doing their presentation.
It is a Tuesday, right?
And we're going to have this committee, Board of Selectmen, and the Finance Committee. That was it for Chairman's
Are we
report.
going to be up here or big room?
Big room.
Big room?
There can be too many people to put in this room.
It'll be televised?
Yes.
Budget review. Do you want to go over the sheet we got, Frank?
Yes. As many of you will remember, we decided at the 11th hour to utilize what we guess
John,
would
did you get
be-
a copy of this? By the way, you might want to see what
I
we're
have.
just so you can
Hi, Don.
slowly get up to speed with us.
Sorry. Let me start again. When we set our estimate for revenue in order to fund this fiscal year, we decided to use $350,000 of what historically has been excess levy capacity to fund, among other things, an increase in the budget to Whitman Hanson. The concern I expressed at that meeting was we were using money that we couldn't readily identify, but we anticipate would be available. And as an offset, we did retain free cash available for appropriation in the event that these numbers weren't there. I asked our accountant to work through the numbers that we have used for estimates and to work with the DOR to, I guess, lack of a better word, extrapolate what we expect those numbers would be. And if you look at the second column, 3 lines from the bottom, based on all available information, his estimate is that we will have in our levy capacity $553,000 when we go to set the tax rate. However, we have used $350,000 of that. So if all of these numbers are supported, we will have an additional levy capability of $203,000 when we set our tax rate in late October or early November.
All right. And is that it, Frank?
That's it.
All right. I think some of you got copied on an email. The levy, excess levy situation is something that we're going to hopefully have Frank and Mr. Madden kind of formalize how that's being done. There's some questions of how it was listed. If it's not the matter of not having the funds, I think it's just how it's being presented to the public and on some of the DOR reports.
Yeah, I think the concern is to just make sure we have the funds, and if the funds are there, we didn't spend everything in excess of what we actually have. That's certainly my concern, is that looking at some of the documents that I've looked at, that 350,000 was a number that shouldn't have been counted in where it was. And as long as we have the money, that's what's important.
Right.
You know?
Well, I agree with John's comment that in the presentation on Article 2, we have typically not included a revenue column as part of the town meeting warrant. Those numbers were things that we use internally to calculate what we have available in what we believe will be total funds by the time we complete our property valuations and set the numbers for new growth and calculate what our actual levy is and what our levy ability is. That 350,000 should have been reflected as anticipated, but not in the column it was in. And I think that's what created the concern that John had, because it doesn't foot to.
Well, it doesn't balance out. I
Yeah.
mean, you're looking at, what money's coming in and where we're spending it, and if we include money that typically has been underspent, we've had, we haven't spent as much as we could have. I mean, the excess levy is
Correct.
basically a measurement of our maximum allowable levy and what we actually levied.
That's right.
And so the difference of the two is that number, and it's actually more of a telltale number of how well we're doing in our budget process. And if we're doing well, we've got to that maximum allowable target as closely as possible, unless we decide we don't want to do it,
Right.
unless we decide we want to not spend the money. And I think we, at a point now where this committee is meeting to review a possible override, we need to look at how we're spending the money and making sure we're doing a good job spending the money and getting our levy as close to the maximum allowable levy as we can. And even with this sheet, it's saying we're 200,000 off, which in my opinion is still kind of high. Even with the 350 out, I'd like to see us get better. And if that's the case, then how do we want to go, and do we do a fall meeting to try to capture
Well,
that money somehow and
Not
spend
to
it?
cut
if
you
it
off,
is there?
John, but I think that's kind of a good way to segue right now into how can we spend it better? How are we going to spend it better?
Well,
And
I'm sorry, Ray.
And I think might be a good time to introduce the gentleman that has been chosen to kind of help the town navigate through those waters, and be an ally to Frank and the town accountant and FinCom, and work together and produce what we all hope is a sustainable budget that is going to be meeting our the demands of service, that are going to be meeting the demands of the kids we have in the school system. And it's the reason why we're all sitting here right now. Is what we're doing enough, or are we going to need more? And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Madden and have him give a little presentation of what he's going to offer, and then we'll open it up for some brief questions, okay?
Well, first of all, I'm very uncomfortable with the words chosen and one in the same phrase. It's a bad time to be talking chosen one. So, I've got 31 years of municipal finance experience. I started in Hingham, and then I spent 17 years in Plymouth as a town accountant eventually, and 12 years as a finance director in Duxbury. I took a little bit of time off to work for Pete Marwick when there was a big 8, and converting accounting systems for cities and towns across the Commonwealth. I've been the president of the Mass Municipal Auditors and Accountants Association. I am currently the education coordinator for that association, and actually worked with a couple of CPAs to develop the current education program that's taught out at Amherst to members who wish to attend. I retired in March of 2018, and by December I'd gotten a retirement dog that was just beating me to death, and I bumped into a friend who does consulting, and he asked me if I would get involved in a couple of projects that he was working on. Under him, I have done the budget process for the town of Rockland, who was short-staffed at the time, and also the town of Uxbridge, who appears to always be short-handed. Wonderful people, just it's a tough town. And currently, first of all, as I go through these, you guys were my primary focus. I am finishing up a fraud audit assessment in Woburn, and probably when I'm done here, another fraud audit assessment in Mansfield. That doesn't mean there's fraud, it's just a question of how to prevent it. Budgeting has probably been the greatest aspect of being a finance director, that and forecasting and projecting. I always loved that because, you know, accounting wise, numbers have always scared me, so I try and shy away from those. But come on, that's kind of funny. But I think that over the years, when I first came to Duxbury, they were using nearly $1.9 million in free cash to balance their budget. The problem is, and it might be common knowledge, maybe it's not, but once you begin to use free cash for ongoing expenses, then there's no longer considered free cash. And eventually you run out of free cash, and the tenor of conversations generally change. I've had some conversations with Scott. I have an idea of what you're looking for. I did not bring anything but a notebook today because I don't want to be presumptuous in thinking that I already have a solution to what it is that you're looking for or what it is that you want to see. I think maybe I can bring new eyes and a different perspective to the process. I'm certainly not coming in here and saying this is not only the way I would do it, but the way you ought to do it too. It's doomed to fail. So that would not be my approach. I would anticipate nearly being joined at the hip with Frank, and have extensive conversations with at least the town accountant, potentially the assessor, and maybe the building inspector, and anybody else you want me to talk to. That's how I see this process going along. I do see a look back. I'd like to go back. I'd be comfortable going back about 6 years to see changes, at least 5 years worth of changes, so 6 years. Just to get a look back. Where are your trends? Are there any anomalies in there? What has changed, and what have you done with those changes in the past 5 years? Integrate those trends and any potential anomalies you see coming up into a look forward from there. So ultimately, I'd like to at least review 5 years, current year, 5 years. And then we'll go from there. I have ideas of the information that I'm going to need. I don't know if that's getting too down into the weeds.
Well, this is really the overview for us, but definitely we want to identify, I think, what we expect to accomplish,
Right.
and what you're going to need from us to initially.
I mean, this brief history, I don't know exactly what Scott told you, but this committee was set up. We in the past few years were part of a regional school district, with ongoing increases they've put on us. We're having a hard time meeting everyone's needs. And we have seen the school district suffer, and we have given them a good chunk of money. It doesn't seem to be enough, though. We do have currently a possible assessment issue that's kind of in the works, where we may see a swing in assessment money, which is going to have to be figured out. But ultimately, this committee was set up to devise a plan, I guess we could say a strategic plan, of where this town is going to be in 5 years. And if we are going to fix it, we want to fix it now. And just like you had said, different set of eyes to help Frank and the team we have here make a decent map that we know we're going to be able to live by 4 or 5 years.
And I believe I can provide that to you.
And the biggest part of that is a working budget tool that effectively identifies our sources of revenue, our anticipated growth, and what we need to move forward. It's, for the last 2 years, we have recognized that we haven't been able to support in the levy all of the needs of the town. We did enter into an agreement with the Collins Center to develop a capital plan. We're going to be receiving that capital plan on October 8th, and we'll be identifying a suggested approach going forward to fund capital. But all of that comes back to how do we budget? How do we identify our revenue, and how do we allocate it? You will see in history there are years that we've had significant revenue growth which was not anticipated until we set the tax rate. So that has harmed us to some degree, because there were years where we could have utilized that additional revenue and built our tax rate to support those needs. You know, I just want to, bearing in mind that people may be watching this now or later, comment on where we started. John had noted the issue of being able to spend effectively, but people should understand that it's not that we're looking to spend more money, it's that we have greater needs than we've been able to address. And that's the reason this committee exists, and why we want to identify and justify to people what we're asking for and why we need it. And a big part of that is having a budget work process that effectively identifies and provides accurate information, so that when people come to vote, they know why they're voting.
I think part of it, and unless you're a city, okay, and you're not, Whitman is no different than any other community with the vagaries of the budget process. You're starting now, or will soon be starting for FY21, okay? Your projections will be based, so you'll be going into the budget season anticipating what you're going to spend up through June 30th, 2021, sometime after August 26, 2019. Good luck with that. But you're not alone. That happens in every community. So you make the most educated analysis that you can to develop your revenues. Now you know what you have to work with. Then you go into town meeting in the spring, before your values have even been done yet. They're done on June 30th. Okay? And then the tax rate the following late September or into November. Some even go as late as December. So you've devised a budget that begins 18 months before the end of the fiscal year that you're budgeting for, without knowing what your new growth is going to be and everything that goes along with it. And the fact that communities can do that consistently year after year after year is a tribute to the people that do this job. And don't ever lose sight of that. And I think that's what made me so proud of the work that we had done as a team in the communities I was in. I heard you talking earlier about excess levy capacity or unused levy capacity. You can't help it. I mean, you can work with. I worked very closely with Scott and Duxbury to get an idea of, what do your building permits look like? What are they turning into as far as value goes? Just hoping that, well, not hoping because we were always very conservative, but believing that we could develop a new growth number that would be reasonable. Yet, come November in the rate setting process, didn't leave us in a lurch. I think we can get there. I think we can create I know we can get there. And we can create a working tool. Again, some of the modeling that I've done over 30 years or so is pretty solid. It is malleable, since I can't say manipulable. And I think we can get to, well, okay, so the trend has been 2%, but we see it as 3%. Okay. 3%, that type of thing. Now there are anomalies that are going to come up. If you remember, several years ago there was the gas settlement that provided hundreds of thousands of dollars to communities. Nobody plans for an $800,000 anomaly. Good for you if you get one. But what we want to especially do is prevent against the negative anomalies. Why did you not think that would happen? Have you been reading the papers? I felt pretty good in my previous life that we were always one step ahead of motor vehicle. People weren't buying cars. Motor vehicle excise revenue was going down. We could see that happening. And we managed to stay ahead of it. It's common sense. If it got really complicated, I couldn't do it. But a lot of it comes together because it happens. It's consistent. You're exposed to it every day, every year. So, like I said, if I can get the information that I need, get a sense of what the nuances are. I understand Mass General Law. I understand how cities and towns run. We all do the same thing differently. So I need to know what it is about Whitman that is different than what I've experienced. And that is crucial. And an awareness of that needs to be made up front. Because when we get to the end, they say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, we always plan for that. I said, oh, did you write it down? No, we just knew. That's not going to help. It's not going to help. But yeah, it's the nuances of what makes Whitman financially that I need to know so that I don't go running down some rabbit hole and it's just such a bad idea.
So, and if I may, what I hope to see from this process is a critique of how we've been doing things and what changes would make what we're doing more effective. Best description that I can give you for what we're looking to do. We want to know if we're not doing things we should be doing. Let's identify those and work from that position and identify what create a template. This is what we have to do. This is how we do it. Mm-hmm. That's what I hope to see coming from this.
And I believe that you'll have that. I think that you'll have that.
Right. I think if you looked at a previous trend of 5 years, we kind of go into almost a chaos mode when it comes to our, build up to town meeting. I think for the taxpayers, we really need to try and to build the trust back up in the taxpayer. We need to do everything in our power to avoid that, and been discussed, if I would like to see this lead to that 5-year plan. We have the Collins study, we have the capital plan being worked on, and then a development where we are going to be in. That's my crutch, is where will this town be in 5 years? And we need to make sure when this committee wraps up that we know. And I don't think it's the outcome of an override. It's being able to say to the taxpayers where this town is going to be in 5 years, and getting a stronger grip on our finances is that pebble in the scale of the strategic plan that I think we're trying to build.
I may have read too much into it, but you used the word chaos and plan. And if that's the public perception, then it needs to be conveyed to the public that you have a plan.
Right.
So often the resident will look at a budget and think, eye of newt, tail of lizard, stir, and there it is. But you all know that there's much more to it than that. But I think it's important to get it out there that it is much more than that, and that these are where the numbers come from, and these are the ones we're certain of, and these are the ones that we feel comfortable with. Again, you went into this fiscal year and without state numbers. You got a pretty good idea what they're going to be by then, but nobody had signed off on them. Those are the types of things that a plan can help you overcome, as well as building confidence with your residents, with your taxpayers.
And I think another large piece, and Ms. Byers is on the school committee. Being a regional school district they're part of our town, but they almost work independently to a certain point. And that has presented challenges.
Mind if I ask a question? Do you have experience with regional school districts, or what is your experience in working?
Plymouth Carver Regional, when I was in Plymouth. Yeah, I know that's a long time ago. I mentioned I'm retired, didn't I?
No.
I know, Plymouth Carver, whoa. I've been
Right.
that.
Unfortunately, Plymouth Carver
Carver
Intermediate
Seminole.
School and Plymouth Community Intermediate School used the same initials, so it didn't cost too much to convert. But
Okay.
yeah, and you had debt associated with the dissolution. There was a lot going on. What the tremendous advantage is when they were a regional school, or even when they dissolved, was that the school offices, the administrative offices, were in town hall, and you just go down and just, when I was there, again, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, Bernie Sidman was the superintendent of schools, and he just said, Bernie, can you explain this to me? Yeah, oh yeah, Bernie. So tall, so tall. So that really helped. That really helped. I mean, the close quarters of everybody that is making decisions. It's not, call the person up, leave an email, text. You just walk down the hall.
Yeah. What year did they dissolve? Do you remember the Carver split off?
93, 94, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah.
Wow.
I would have said it was longer.
I have two questions that came to mind as you were talking, reference the excise tax and getting ahead of it. And as a school committee member, I've been doing my best to look at the Chapter 70 funding, Foundation Budget Review Commission.
Talk about eye of newt and tail of lizard. That's a formula, huh?
I know. And it's been a work in progress since 2015, when some people gathered to begin looking at the foundation budget. That being said, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but along the same lines of excise tax, I think it's important to look ahead as a regional school district and be realistic over what type of changes might come our way based on any foundation budget review, and how that may benefit us or not. You hear a lot. They just put 5.5% increase this year into Chapter 70 funding, but not our school district, based on demographics, based on student population. So that rolls into our 5-year plan, and as Randy mentioned, you know, the town over the past 5 years has put a greater funding into the school assessment compared to prior years, but it hasn't truly increased school budget. It's only made up for what wasn't there in Chapter 70 state.
2018 was supposed to be just a banner year for the state, revenue collections. It's going to be great. And the communities that I've dealt with in the last year or so have seen Chapter 70 go up between 1 and 1.5%.
We'd be happy for one.
Ours was 0.45, less than 0.5%
Okay.
increase this.
You know, are we looking back to projecting level funding on state aid? You know, it loosened up for a little while there. After I believe it was what, 08 or 09 where they made the big.
Well, fortunately, we don't get a lot, so if they cut it, it doesn't hit us as hard as it
$10,000,
did
yeah.
15 years ago when they cut it in half.
Unfortunately, he couldn't be here this evening, but the superintendent is actually on this committee,
Okay.
Jeff Simonak, and he definitely will be a resource, and more than, he'll also be as good a go-between as Frank will be.
That would be great, because, you know, I'm sorry that, you know, I said, who I need to work, of course, some representative, whether it's the business manager or the superintendent or, you know, whoever, because if you know, I can't guess what you have going on. I mean, I clearly I have more experience dealing with police departments and DPWs than I do with regional school systems. So I have conceptually maybe not a lot to learn, but again, what is it that the you know, Whitman Hanson Regional School System is trying to accomplish?
I would ask, you mentioned a 5-year trend. I think that is a very small snapshot. I think we need a panoramic view, and I'd like to ask you to go back 12 years, truly to look at the funding, only because that would be going back, if we're looking at FY21, right? Going back 12 years would be 2009. That was the year that our assessment plummeted after the recession, 2008. So we went from 12.1 million in our assessment for schools down to 10.4 million. We lost 13% in that assessment. It took 6 years to get back up to 12.2 million in 2014. It took 6 years to get back to that funding. So if you were to go back 5 years, from 2020 to 2015, looks great. You know, we've had 3% assessment, 8.5% assessment. We've, you know, shot up. But as a regional school district, we're just, you know, limping.
I don't remember that big a reduction in assessments. I remember a couple of years where we were very close to level, and one year when we went down a couple of 100,000, but I don't remember any assessments dropping that much.
It's worth taking a look at.
Yeah.
But I want to caution you that looking too far back and looking too far ahead, like 5 years will give you, let's say looking forward, 5 years will give you a pretty good idea. 3 years will give you a really good idea. Right? 10 years, really 10 years, looking out at what could potentially happen. That's why I think you got to be careful how far back you look and how far forward you look, because of what can occur. I'll go back and look at it. I'm not exactly sure how it will work into what we're trying to accomplish, but I'll look at it certainly, and we'll see what it has to offer. But absolutely, I
And
mean,
maybe
like I
I'm
said,
speaking on a town-wide scale of, you know, where our schools could be or should have been had that, you know, sort of regression not happened. And I think being realistic about the economy right now too, because we are at the top, right? We you know, haven't had a recession since '08. Something's going to happen. It's going to break sometime. And if it's going to be in the next 5 years, where does that? And you can't. No one has a crystal ball, but there are, you know, past history is an indicator of the future.
Understood.
Any other questions from any of the members?
time frame? What type of turnaround time do you need to get this completed?
You guys meet next Monday?
No.
That's good, that's good. Be ready.
If you give us a time,
I've looked at this as about 160 hours, which would be, you know, 4 solid weeks, which you're not going to get. So 5 is, I'd like to come back in a couple of weeks. I would certainly like to not come back in 6 weeks and say, isn't this the most awesome thing you've ever seen in your life? Because that's just, again, doomed to fail. I'd like to come back, provide information to Frank that he can disseminate even between the interim progress meetings, if that's all right with the committee. You know, again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that you guys have been down before, thinking it's the right thing to do, and you determined years ago that it was just a horrible idea. So,
I think it would be helpful for me, if we're targeting the 8th for that joint meeting with the Collins group, to have, even if it's not a finalized version, for me to have some type of idea of kind of what we're thinking going into that meeting, so I can digest that information, you know, better.
Basically, we're looking at 5 weeks to get
But if there's
interim.
Yeah, if there's interim
you'll have something.
information in between, that, again, it doesn't have to be finalized.
Right.
I think as long as we have a 10,000 foot view or 5,000 foot view, I think that's okay.
so if we had you back for an update, let's say, like September 16th, it would give you just about 3 weeks. Or even the 23rd.
Don, what was the report that the school was going to
Oh,
get?
yeah, the Mass Regional. They actually thought it was going to be ready on Friday, but it will be sent to Jeff. So I don't know, he may have it in his inbox, but
Okay.
I would expect. So Mass Regional Schools is putting together an overview of the member towns. So they provide this consulting service that our superintendent has procured already. It's going to give some data.
There was, yeah, I think there's a lot of helpful data in there that will get to you.
Okay.
as soon
Around
as-
minimum local contributions of each member town and assessment funding, so forth. I think I have a paper here.
And that report will be presented when?
Oh, here it is right here. It was
Any
gonna,
day now.
yeah, any day
We're
now.
hoping to
Right,
see
yeah,
it in the next couple of days. And that certainly will provide to you.
Get some of the
Right.
information.
You have that available.
Can you have it?
And I think, you know, kind of speaking as a citizen representative, right? I think that report's great, but it comes from, you know, a group that's associated with, you know, school districts. I think adding in, you know, information that you can provide, to me, starts for me at least, to be able to line up data that comes from different sources so that we can get a relatively independent view, right? There's biases in everything, but, you know, I really think, you know, behooves us to try to present to the town and to the citizens as independent a view as we can. So again, coming into this, whether we need an override or not, you know, I don't know, but presenting to the town a picture of what it would look like with and without, you know, what it's going to look like if we try to live within the levy limit that we have today for the next 5 years, versus, you know, what we might need to do to get the things that folks need and want. And the more independent sources of data we have backing that up, I think is really important, so.
Yeah,
So
it'll
for
be
folks who are
interesting to
hearing,
report.
for folks who are hearing, you know, aren't some of these things overlap? I think they are, but they're coming from different sources, and I think it's important to have multiple sources for these things.
I think for me, one of the key things of this committee is it's a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Starting with the blank slate, yes, it's called the Budget Override Evaluation Committee, but we're not necessarily saying this is the path we're going down right now. Clean slate, fresh canvas.
I almost wish we called it the Budget Evaluation Committee, because the emphasis is on override because we recognize that we have insufficient revenue to do all the things we need to do. But the goal isn't necessarily
Right.
an override, it's to right the ship, to get a sense of what our resources are and how to best utilize them.
Well, I hope that the information that I provide you will allow you to develop options. I would not want to think that what I give you, or the recommendations that I give you, will give you one option, or have you just thinking in one direction. I hope it's a fluid document for you, and I hope that it works. A regional school, a little bit different, but I've always prided myself, and when I refer to the town of Whitman or the town of Duxbury, the town of Plymouth, it's a footprint. It's a border surrounded by other towns. It's not every department but the school or anything like that. It's a, rising tide, all the boats. So if you hear me refer to the town of Whitman, I'm not leaving out the schools, as I never did in Duxbury. It's a consolidated effort. I'm curious about this report, of course. I'd like to see how we could utilize it. Once it comes in, we can talk about it at greater length as to what this report is going to do for the regional school district going forward. What is it going to provide for you as a roadmap over the next 5 years, at least? So that'll be great. And it'll help in the overall pulling together of the report.
So would a kind of a midpoint briefing, would you, or around the 23rd there?
Well, you had mentioned the 16th.
16, 20, I want to give you some options just in case they didn't work. But I think we would like it before the Collins Center.
Okay, when is that? I started right down. When is the Collins Center?
Collins
October
Center,
8th.
October 8th.
The Tuesday night.
Okay, that would work because that'll remind me that my anniversary is next day. I got that covered. I'm married on John Lennon's birthday, so I know when my anniversary is. And so, again, on the 16th, I know I'm open. Let's just take a look.
And that only gives you
You know,
about,
truthfully, the 16th, at least to provide the bones for a report would be better. The 23rd is not going to work.
all right,
So I'd
16th.
rather try and move it up a little than push it off 4 weeks.
16th, what? It's Monday? Yep, it's Monday, yep, all right.
I won't be here, but it's all right.
Is there anybody in particular, John? I mean, I know we'll talk quite a bit in the interim, but anybody that, do you want the accountant here? Or you want to just talk to him prior to that? Any department heads that you think would be helpful?
You know, is it all right if I go over that with you, Frank?
Sure.
Just to make sure, because I think from the conversation tonight, I know what I need to get started. It's just a question of who would be best to jumpstart the process. Where can I get these information? What are you willing to provide to me?
We'll provide everything you need.
And then,
I mean, we can do it from annual reports, we can do it from budget documents we've used over the years, whatever format
Yeah, so I'd like to sit down. with
best
you and we can
works for
just-
you.
and I will reach out to Jeff, but can you make sure he gets Jeff and
Yes,
Christine's contact, because they are going to be critical of the school.
Okay.
It really does have to, like you had said, you know, all boats rise with the tide. That is a critical component of this process.
Absolutely.
All right,
I think,
all right, so 16th is set. Thank you, Mr. Madden, for coming in. The update on the old business was the school assessment. With Jeff not being here, we're going
I don't have an update.
to bypass, if that's okay with
Table
everyone. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you very much.
I look forward to this a lot.